The dumbest political issue in the country is tucked away in this imposing, brutalist Death Star fortress behind me. It affects you every single day. It affects everybody you know. And it's likely that you're spending like a third of your money on it every month.
Tonight in the economy, high home prices are pushing some Nashville residents out of the state, and new numbers show a housing shortage is to blame.
There isn't a state in the country where someone working at minimum wage with 40 hours a week can afford a typical two-bedroom apartment.
For the first time in more than a decade, the Philadelphia Housing Authority opened its Housing Choice Voucher waiting list, but the website couldn't keep up with the demand.
We're seeing rates of homelessness steadily increase. We're seeing shelters filling up.
The issue is housing. We don't build enough homes, and the ones we do build are too expensive. So you're probably wondering why I think this is the dumbest issue in American politics, because there's a lot of competition these days. And I'm wondering, how do I get out of this TV? Here's the thing. We all agree on the solution to this problem. People on the right, on the left, basically everybody understands that the solution is to make it easier to build more housing, especially housing that's affordable. And yet, here we are in the middle of this crisis. So you might be wondering, why don't we just build more housing? Well, here we go.
No debate and no deal for a proposed apartment complex in South Milwaukee.
The Rochester City Council rejects a developer's request to rezone a vacant property to make way for a proposed apartment complex.
Yeah, an effort to rezone this church property for apartment use was rejected tonight.
Neighbors were in opposition of an apartment complex that would allow over 800 apartments to be built behind their homes. They say they were promised no complex would go in their neighborhood.
That's right. Every single home in this country has to be approved on the local level in a city council like this one. And that means that the locals, the existing neighbors, can weaponize local rules and local processes like public comment periods to delay projects by years, adding millions of dollars in the cost, which makes the housing more expensive, or sometimes prevents it from getting built at all. But I have a solution.
There's a role for everybody to play, state, local, and federal, in solving the housing crisis.
I'm in DC with Leah MacArthur at Up for Growth. This is a nonprofit that's focused on removing barriers and creating more housing all around the country.
There are about 40,000 entities across the United States that are in charge of zoning. Most places have been accumulating regulations over a period of decades, right? And so many of these things may have made sense at the time, but now, today, we're left with an accumulation of all these regulations stacked on top of one another, really make it very difficult to build any new housing at all, especially any new affordable housing. Planning departments can range from really, really small to really, really big and complicated. And so a lot of these places really want to enact change, but they have trouble getting started because it's really complicated and because they don't have the resources they need just to understand how to start. One of the best possible resources is going to be HUD. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is really well positioned to come in and help these smaller state and local entities understand where to start. Experts from HUD can collect and understand what are the best practices around starting to repeal some of these regulations and replace them with smarter laws that can enable more housing and more types of housing. HUD can provide resources to these places who are strapped for cash, strapped for capacity. And so HUD is in a great position to collect a bunch of information from across the United States and say, you know what, under these conditions, these types of policies tend to work. And then give the cities that feedback and let the cities come back in and fill in, whatever's gonna work for them. They can really customize these models to solve the problems that are local. So it's really local problem solving enabled by HUD.
Ever since HUD's formation in the 1960s, it's largely been focused on big apartment buildings in urban centers. Even today, the vast majority of the budget goes towards rental subsidies and housing projects in big cities. A relatively small fraction of the budget goes to policy development and research, the stuff that I think is so important to creating more forms of housing, but increasingly, HUD is getting excited about projects like this one behind me. I'm standing on the National Mall at the Innovative Housing Showcase, where HUD is organizing all of the best innovation we've got in terms of different types of shelter and how we can provide it. You've got everything from temporary shelters that show up in emergency situations that are independent, off-grid, can be spun up really fast, all the way to ADUs, townhouses, manufactured homes. They're showing everything. We've also got some really innovative technology. There's somebody 3D printing concrete structures in Alaska. There are people 3D printing with recycled plastic bottles. It's really, really a huge variety of options, and it's wonderful to see them all assembled in one place. Now, we're at a really unique time in history because HUD is getting increasingly interested in these kinds of smaller scale projects. The fact that less than a fraction percentage of their budget goes to policy research is actually a good thing. It's a low cost, high impact policy. And my hope is that you and I, can go to the description below this video and engage HUD in different ways to do more of this research and to disseminate it so that more states and cities can adopt the zoning reform they need so that we can get more housing built faster in this country.
It's incredibly impactful when people show up for housing.
I'm here with Laura Foote from Yimi Action. Laura's the executive director of this grassroots organization that organizes and activates advocates for housing all around the country.
You as a person watching this video, I think people underestimate how easy and how empowering it can be to get involved in local politics. This is a self-inflicted problem, and it is entirely possible to just change our laws. This is a very solvable problem, and I kind of love that people are feeling the wind at their backs. I mean, when I got started 10 years ago, it was a sort of slow descent into madness. There was just nobody who was even admitting that there was a housing shortage. Politically speaking, right? You would read articles, there's a housing shortage. Everyone I know would say there's a housing shortage. And yet you'd show up at City Hall and 100%, and I'm not even kidding, 100% of the voices were saying there's various reasons why we don't need this. Well, it should have parking. It shouldn't have parking. It's going to block out the sun, all resulting in this one big loud no, 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 not here. And now we've got a real chance with grassroots advocacy mobilizing so that there are people every day at those hearings saying, yes, we need more housing. Yes, we have a housing shortage. And so we need to build this project and 100 more like it. We're advocating across the country. We've got more than 50 chapters now. And we're part of a grassroots movement that is saying, not only do we need to say yes to individual housing projects, but we need to mobilize to change state laws. We need to get federal programs going so that we systematically address America's chronic housing shortage. We need real systematic change, and it's entirely possible. There are so many cities in America that are ready to get on board with the pro-housing movement. There are so many local elected officials who do want the tools to change their planning code to address their local housing shortage. And we want to empower them, we want to enable them, we want to support them in that effort to make change in their community.
If you pop into the description below the video, you're going to find links to petitions you can sign to support this kind of work at HUD. And in general, I'll keep lots of advocacy options open in the description below this video so that you can help us get more housing built in this country. Once you've done that and you're ready to see more videos about all the cool housing I saw in the National Mall, check this out. Let's build some housing.